You gonna say?
All right. Welcome everybody to the Gen Z podcast, episode 3 of our podcast. It's been a couple weeks, I believe 2 weeks since our last episode where we covered radical Islam. Today, myself, Jake, am joined with my friend Matthew, and we are going to be talking about Christianity and kind of religion as a whole. The reason we're doing this, Matt Pastrana is a Christian. I believe he's Lutheran, correct?
Yep, Lutheran, and then
Yep.
you are agnostic, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I've gone in and out of being agnostic and Christian my whole life, kind of going back and forth, sometimes month to month. As far as I stand, I want there to be a God. I don't necessarily think I'm going to find it through Christianity, though. So that's kind of where I stand. So Matthew Pastrana is going to try to sway me onto the side of feeling more confident in the possibility of a God tonight. And I'm going to be sharing some of my concerns with the morality of Christianity and some of its doctrines. So I think, did I set that up pretty fairly?
You said that perfect. I think it's important that we start with like the idea of God as a whole, like as him existing, and then later on in the podcast we can get into specifics of Christianity itself. But
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the best way to start off would be talk about the possibility of a God, because like you stated before, if I'm not mistaken, you go between back and forth of like whether there is God or not, even to begin with. So I think that there's a lot of things that just come with faith, but I know you're a very factual man. I consider myself to enjoy the facts as well. So
Right.
I thought something that you might find interesting is, do you know about the 4 fundamental forces in physics?
I have heard the term before, but I couldn't name them off the top of my head.
So the 4 fundamental forces in physics are gravity, electromagnetic, strong nuclear, and weak nuclear. And these are the forces that make up our universe. And after the Big Bang, these forces, like their values, were determined less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang. So in less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang occurred, these values were determined. And if they had even been a fraction off...
Hold on, Matt, 1 second. I'm getting a text from someone watching it saying they can't hear what you're saying.
They can't hear me?
They said, can't hear Matt. I don't know what he's saying.
How about, I think I should... Oh. I think
I don't know.
should be able to... Wait, let me... Let's figure... You want to talk for a second while I figure this out?
Yeah, it's always fun doing research on scientificproofgodexists.com.
No, that's...
No, I'm just messing with you.
This is stuff
No, yeah, I don't know. I've heard scientific arguments. Like, I've heard the argument that, like, okay, I've heard this one, because this is like a physics argument. I've heard that, like, if the Big Bang Theory really was correct, then just based on, there's this one principle of physics where if an object explodes, all the things that come out of it are going in the same rotation, yet some planets spin opposite ways. So it was the argument was, and I don't know if this is a strong argument or not, but the argument was, if the Big Bang Theory is true, why are some planets spinning the wrong way? Or not, they're not all spinning in unison, in the same direction, which, according to physics, would have to have been possible if the Big Bang Theory did occur.
Okay, so why don't you...
I don't... continue.
You want to talk... I'm still trying to figure out my sound. I don't know why that would be happening, but I'm going to go to my sound volumes and try and up them slightly, but...
Wait, maybe your mic levels?
Yeah, my mic levels. Do you know where I find my mic levels?
Yeah, you're gonna... I love how we're doing this. You're gonna click on the little arrow at the bottom right, and then you're gonna right-click on speakers.
I have my speaker somewhere else. Okay, and then...
And you're gonna do open sound settings, or no? You're gonna click on sounds. My bad. Pastrana, why are we doing this right now? Sounds, and then you're going to go to recording, and you can look at your microphone levels, right?
Yes.
And you can do it through there.
Yeah.
My mic levels aren't super high, so I don't know.
we're just gonna turn it all the way up. Let's see what happens.
All right. Yeah. Just turn it all the way.
It should be easier to understand me now for sure. All right.
Okay.
Let's get
Continue
back
with
to
the four.
Yeah. So there are 4 fundamental forces in physics. These being gravity, electromagnetic, electromagnetic. I apologize. Strong nuclear and weak nuclear. And the values of each of these forces was determined less than 1/1,000,000th of a second after the Big Bang. And if any one of these values had been slightly off, our universe as we know it would not exist. For example, if the ratio between, I believe it was electromagnetic and it was either strong or weak nuclear had been slightly off, we would have no stars whatsoever. So the values of each of these forces is very important. And after this discovery, many prominent atheists said it completely shocked the way they viewed the world. For example, a physicist by the name Fred Hoyle, he's the one who coined the term the Big Bang. He stated, "My atheism was greatly shaken by these developments." Now I know you're not atheist, so what I'm showing is that physicists who are people who heavily rely on facts because they're scientists, saw this, and they saw that the way that our universe was constructed, there's an apparent design behind it. This is something that was stated by the theoretical physicist Paul Davies. He stated that the appearance of design is overwhelming. There's such a pattern in the way our universe was created, and it's so improbable that it just happened accidentally, that it leads one to the conclusion that there had to be some greater force.
Yeah,
a hand in our creation.
I've heard this argument before, the idea that if one thing was just a fraction off, then life on Earth would be impossible, right? Humans wouldn't exist. Everything is fine-tuned so specifically in order for humans to exist. So my problem with this argument is that, okay, let's say that one thing was different. Life could still exist in a different way. Does that make sense? We evolved on Earth to be able to survive the conditions we were given on Earth.
Yeah.
We evolved over time to match from the distance of the sun. Okay, how warm do our body temperatures need to be, to be able to survive the sun? How cold can it get? Things like that. So if anything was off just a little bit, yes, the world would be way different. But creatures and life would have also evolved differently, right?
Yeah, but I think
to fix that. So that doesn't prove the existence of God. It just proves that evolution gives you the things you need to survive in the situation you're in.
Yeah, I agree where you're coming. I see where you're coming from, but what I'm trying to state is that without all these values being what they are, life wouldn't have even happened at all. There would be no Earth, no creatures that could have evolved
in the way that they are today. Life as we know it.
Let's say
that's just silly. We found life on other planets. We found bacteria and stuff. And
I know, but
so you can't say.
All right,
so it is life as we know it.
Do you know what antimatter is? Are you familiar with antimatter? So you know what matter is? It's things that make up all things, right? It's what makes up everything. Antimatter is it's the opposite. So when it goes into contact with matter, it instantly destroys it. There's a lot of people trying to discover how this works, and one thing that's curious is that the way our universe was created through the Big Bang, technically it should have created an equal amount of matter and antimatter. Okay, are you following so far? But if that would have happened,
how do we know that? How do we know that? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying how did they know that it would have created an equal?
I'm not sure I've read up on dark matter before, just because antimatter, because there's a difference between dark matter and antimatter, but that's for a different time. But I've read on before. I don't remember the specific reason how we know, but just in a theoretical sense, I just remember reading across several different sources that it should have been an equal amount, and the fact that it wasn't is interesting because either some of the smartest minds in the history of the world were just wrong about the creation wrong about the Big Bang and how much should have been created, or that there is some force acting for us
that has created these two things. So, okay, But we say, for example, we had the argument the other day that, okay, God, you would agree that God created the laws of physics, correct? He had to have if he created the universe. So why would he create the laws of physics but then defy the laws of physics? Why would, if he's creating this system of physics and these laws that naturally have to occur, why would his doings then contradict the laws he's making? Like, how does that make sense?
Physics is just our attempt to understand these laws, and in my understanding of physics, we can at best estimate how things are supposed to happen and how they should happen, but oftentimes that's just our guesses of how it should work, and this is in ideal situations. Our understanding of physics is in ideal situations, but simple, like, we just don't live in an ideal situation. Like, that's just not how it works.
There are physical laws that do not change. For example, you name me a physics law, right? You must have the same amount of antimatter as matter.
Yeah.
That is a physical law that God supposedly put into place.
Theoretically, it should have created the same amount, yes.
So why is God contradicting his own laws that he created?
Well, the argument is that he's not contradicting them because he's the ones who made them.
Well, he is. He's making a rule, but then he's creating things.
Well, he's not the one who gave the rule that. He's not the one who gave the rule that there had to be the same amount. I've never stated that he's the one who created that rule. It just theoretically, in the creation of the universe through the Big Bang, there should have been the same amount. However, there wasn't. And like I said before, there's just so many things that had to happen perfectly for life to even be possible. For even a universe to exist.
Yeah, this is an argument that I've heard hundreds of times before. I've seen the PragerU video on it before. They have a thing that says, does science argue for or against a god? And this is their entire argument that, okay, what are the odds that all these things would perfectly come together?
Yeah.
Right? And because if they didn't all, life as we know it would not exist.
Yeah. Just right before this, we were talking about some people we watch on YouTube, and actually that video was done by Eric Metaxas on PragerU. We were talking about him before. I mentioned him.
Oh, okay.
That was him. Yeah, that was him. Yeah, and actually,
my problem.
Oh, I think you.
Go ahead.
You just got frozen. Continue. Oh, you're getting frozen now. I don't.
Yeah. I'm seeing the voice quality or the video connection is bad. Here, I'll recall you.
Okay.
All right. I believe it's should be better now.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, back to what I was saying. My problem with that is that argument only proves that life as we know it is not possible without it. It does not prove that life outside of how we know it is not possible, right? Mm-hmm. It does not prove that, say, if we were, 1,000,000 meters farther away from the sun than we are now. It does not prove that life period could not exist. It only proves that life as we know it could not exist. So there's no way of us knowing whether we could exist or not, right? We can't prove that life period would not exist without it. We, in fact, there's some evidence that it can survive because we found life on Mars in the form of, bacteria and stuff like that. Mm. So we know life can exist outside of this world and all the fine tunings that go into this world. So I don't think it proves the thing that you think it proves. I think we would just be humans, not just humans. Maybe humans wouldn't be a thing, right? Maybe, we'd be creatures, or life itself would be so much different if those fine tunings were different, but there wouldn't be no life period.
Well, I agree that in some situations, like let's say we were 1,000 meters further from the sun, we would still exist. Mm-hmm. But for example, the forces I talked about, if those had been different, life would not exist, period. There's some things I agree that if they were different, life would be different. Like life itself would be different, but it would still exist. But a lot of the things, there would be no universe, period.
Well, if those four concepts you mentioned, or four aspects of physics, what are they called?
The four fundamental forces.
yeah, if the four fundamental forces did not exist in physics, that doesn't necessarily prove that life itself could not exist. It just proves that life, again, as we know it, cannot exist.
But you're also assuming that. Okay, you're not assuming, but we don't know that any other life would be viable. Like, we don't know. Like you said, we don't know what the cause, what the effects would be. Like,
Right.
life may not have been possible at all. Like, no life may have been possible. So there has to be something. I agree. God, in my opinion, God could have done it slightly differently, but He made it perfect enough for us to exist in the first place. He could have made us 1,000 meters further from the sun. Sure, life might be slightly different, but the fundamental forces, the fundamental aspects of the Big Bang that determine whether life happened, period, I think those happened because of a greater power.
Okay, yeah, I don't know. I've heard this argument before, and it's just hard for me to buy into when it doesn't prove that life is impossible without all these fine tunings. It only proves that life as we know it is impossible, right? Because it's impossible to prove that life is impossible without these fine tunings. We know life is possible without these fine tunings.
Well,
that's why we found it on Mars.
Technically, we do know it's not possible without these fine tunings.
Well, it is. There's life on Mars. We just said if the Earth was right, the Earth is perfect distance amount away from the sun to keep humans alive. That is an example of God fine-tuning the universe, right?
Yeah.
However, we found life on places where it's not possible for human life. So that means that life is still possible outside of these corrections God has made, but life as we know it, right? Humans looking the way we do, functioning the way we do, is different, right?
I agree. However, like, I think we're picking at straws. I don't know how to word this. I think we're both sort of agreeing that life would. I agree with you. Life would be different. Could be slightly different. It could be. I'm not denying that possibility. All I'm stating.
Well, no, it would be way. It would be way different.
It would be way different if some aspects were changed, but some aspects had to have happened. Some things had to have happened, and the probability that these things were gonna happen is so high, like it's so astronomically high that they were gonna happen on their own, just randomly, that it points to the fact that there has to be something was acting when the Big Bang occurred. Something had to have happened.
You have to assume, if you're going to make that conclusion, that humans as we are and the Earth as we are was the intention, right? You have to assume that the goal was to have humans functioning and looking the way they do.
Yes.
And Earth functioning and looking the way
which is a core value.
What I'm saying is
okay, no, continue.
Right. It is a core value of most religions. But what I'm saying is that if these things weren't fine-tuned the way they are, then the Earth would look much different and there would still be a potential of life. So it's not like without all these fine-tunings, life would be impossible. It's just without all these fine-tunings, things may have ended up differently. But you're assuming the end goal of this all was to have humans look and function the way they do. And there's no way to prove that is the case.
Yeah, I agree. That's where faith comes in. That's where faith is one of the hardest things to prove to someone. I'm gonna be the first to admit you can't simply tell someone to have faith in something, because that's a tough ask. You know what I mean? I can't just tell you to have faith that there's things a certain way. And I'm trying to find, in my time, like as like a developing Christian myself, I've tried to find arguments on behalf of Christianity that can come from a secular perspective, like science. And I also think you're freezing up again slightly. No, you're good now. You're unfrozen.
Yeah, your voice was freezing a little bit for a second there, so I might have just had a connection blip. But yeah, no, I've heard that argument before, the fine-tuning argument, but I just don't think it proves the same thing as people think it proves.
Okay, yeah.
Right? Like it proves one thing, but I don't necessarily think that was the intention, right? And you have to assume that was the intention in order for that to be the case. But but it is a compelling argument. I just think there's a few too many holes in it, or I don't think it's as strong as some people think it is.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know. I have heard that one before though, and there is some truth to it. I mean, it is crazy to think of all the little details and fine-tunings that have gone into the world to make us function, breathe, and all that stuff the way we do, right? So that is pretty crazy. But yeah, so I don't know what the next thing you want to talk about. Do you want to maybe let's go into more some specifics of Catholicism and you know, you kind of talked about why you think there is a God or why there has to be.
You seem to have cut out right there.
Yes.
Whatever you just said right there, just cut it. Can you repeat?
Pastrana?
Yeah, can you repeat what you just said?
Okay. Yeah. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. I started talking, but then I heard you, so I was gonna let you say whatever.
Okay. Well, so what were you gonna say? So were you gonna say something like, because you seem to be ready for like a trans. Our connection's a little spotty right now, but I think it's getting better.
Is that not?
Yes.
And then it drops to 1 bar as soon as you say that.
Yeah. So I think before we get into the specifics of Christianity, so I think a good place to move on, like a good transition, would maybe be morality. Would you be open to this conversation?
Sure.
Like a discussion on morality?
No, yeah. I'll lay out my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Just before we get started, the same when I talk to you. So I don't know if morality comes from God, but if it doesn't, there is a rationale, in my opinion, for why it could potentially not come from God.
Okay.
And I don't think it comes from the Christian God or the Jewish God or any of these religions that we would consider like the classic 5 big religions or anything like that. I can't really speak for Hinduism and Buddhism because I don't know a lot, but I've studied Christianity my entire life. I've studied Islam, and I know a lot about Judaism, given that their law is the first 5 books of the Bible. So my problem is that if God gave us morality, right? If God currently is the one that provides us with morality, then his morality now contradicts his morality when he influenced, or if you are Jewish or a Muslim, you believe that what is written in those books is the word of God. Yeah. That it wasn't just people interpreting what they thought God was. It was literally the word of God. If that's the case, then our morality should be consistent with what God himself wrote down. But it's not. We can look at the Bible and we can say, that's terrible, right? This is horrendous. This is bad. We can say some things are good and this is bad. But the point is we are using our own morality to look at God's morality and pick and choose what we think is moral and what is not.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to adjust your point, then I'm going to ask you a question. So I can't speak for the Jewish faith because I'm not Jewish, but I can speak from a Lutheran perspective on this, that from what I understand, we believe that the Bible was influenced by God, but not directly his word. And that's why there's sometimes contradictions within the Bible. And I will acknowledge them. There are contradictions, especially when it comes to gay rights. Because obviously, there's many verses in the Bible telling you to love your neighbor, love everybody. I mean, it's a common theme within the Bible, right? Can we agree on that? It's a common theme within the Bible that, like, it's the golden rule, loving your neighbor.
Love your neighbor. You can find it. Throughout a lot of the Bible. And you can also find the opposite, but that's where the contradiction.
Yeah, exactly. And I would argue that those are the parts that come from the sentiments at the time, and not from the direct influence of God. That's how I can best understand it. Because I don't think we can truly understand. And I know you're gonna. I already know I know the strongest argument against this is that at that point we're still choosing what we believe God would want and what he wouldn't. Is that what I'm guessing? That's right. Like we're picking and choosing.
Well,
right?
I was gonna say the context of the time is irrelevant if it is God influencing, right? If God is everlasting and he's been here, he was never created, he's always been, which is what religious people believe, at least for Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
then his laws wouldn't be affected by the context of the time.
But
They would be consistent. However, they're not.
well, I don't. So I think right now we're understanding influence differently. Because when I understand influence, I understand that he had a helping hand in the writing of the Bible. But he also gave us free will, the ability to choose, and so he wouldn't infringe upon this. He had to give us some. He couldn't directly tell us what to write. Like he didn't go into someone's mind and tell them to write down something exactly. He influenced the beliefs and the morals that come out in the Bible. But I still think it's susceptible to human failures and human flaws, and I think that can be seen and as an explanation of why there are certain contradictions within the Bible.
But the problem with that viewpoint is then you're cherry picking to fit your own morality what you think God directly influenced and what you think he didn't. Right? You're saying, "Oh, the Bible tells everyone to love each other." Yeah, God was involved in that. Oh, the Bible says to stone your daughter if she's not a virgin on your wedding night. Ooh, well, I don't think God influenced that. You are using your own morality to say what God influenced and what God did not.
A morality that I would argue was given to us by God, and that I would argue that loving your neighbor and loving others is a more common theme and appears more often throughout the Bible and is more consistent throughout the Bible than some of the direct contradictions to it. Like I agree.
Well, I don't think consistency means truth.
Well, I believe because the likelihood of all these prophets and scholars writing about loving thy neighbor, like loving each other under God, the likelihood of all having the same message, and then when it's compiled together, talking about the same God, the likelihood of that happening and everyone agreeing on this is not very high. And I agree, there are some direct contradictions to this, like, for example, the stoning of the daughter if she's not a virgin on her wedding night. There are contradictions, but I believe God gave us free will and a morality to choose he gave us the ability to take context into mind of the times.
Okay, I understand that, but I don't think you really realized in the Bible. I mean, if you look at the Old Testament, if you made a to-do list off of the Old Testament, you would be a psychopathic person. Right? You just would.
Yeah, no,
it's extremely hateful. The only place in the Bible you can really look to say, yes, consistently it's just good, is the Gospels.
Yeah.
Right? And Jesus' life. However, it's exactly what I say it is, cherry picking. Right? You're saying, I like the good stuff. I don't like the bad stuff. So I think God wants me to like the good stuff.
Okay, so you're admitting that there is. So we're going to establish that there is a good and a bad. There's an objective good and objective bad in the world, right?
Absolutely. That's where the hypocrisy of the Bible comes.
So let's move on. So let's talk about this for a moment. So there's an objective good and objective bad, right?
I would say I think there is. I think yeah.
All right. So would you agree that like saving a baby from falling off the table is an objective good? That's objectively good.
Yes.
How do you know?
Because I think if I can intervene to help someone live that's innocent, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that I should do that.
But where do you think those beliefs come from? Like I'm just curious, where do you get these? And that was like a weird example that just popped into my mind. But like where do you believe these beliefs come from? Like what makes you think that that's the right thing to do? Like where does that come from?
I don't know. I could assume it comes from the way I was raised, from nature, from society. I mean, as you're born, when you're born, you're not naturally good. You're really not. That's why your parents need to teach you manners. That's why when you yell at you and throw fits when you don't get what you want. Humans are inherently selfish, and I don't think we're inherently good at all because it's harder to do the right thing than it is to do the bad thing. I think that's the biggest evidence that we are not naturally good. I think, and Dennis Prager on PragerU, he's someone that talks about this a lot, that no, humans aren't naturally good. We need to work to be good, right? And God provides us with the guidelines to achieve that. But I don't think that standard of good necessarily needs to come from God.
Okay, yeah, but if we're not naturally good, then would you agree right now a lot of the beliefs held by society as a whole are objectively good? Like you shall not murder, you shall save a baby if it's like gonna fall off like a table, like right? Like a lot of the beliefs held right now objectively, the majority of beliefs
by society
as a whole are objectively good.
Right now, currently in history, yes,
Yes.
I do think so.
Okay. If humans are not good, then how could we have reached these beliefs? If we are not good, how could we have achieved these without the help of a God? How could we have achieved these if we're not naturally good? I can agree that from birth I don't think we're necessarily good, but I don't think that we're necessarily bad either. I think it's up to us to choose, and that's part of free will. But I think if we can agree that as a society we've reached an objectively good moral standing for the majority of issues, that had to have been possible somehow. Because if we were fundamentally bad, theoretically all of society's morals would be in a bad state right now. Am I mistaken on that?
That does make sense.
That makes sense. So if we were objectively bad, if we were bad as a society, we would both be agreeing right now that a lot of the morals being held would be bad. That's the argument I'm trying to make right now. You kind of understand what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. I think it might not be as black and white because there's good arguments in favor of both, right? The idea that you're saying, okay, if we're inherently bad, how did society end up being good?
Yeah.
Generally, right?
Yeah. How did we become good?
At the same time, if we're inherently good, why do we need prison, right? Why do we need to work to do the right thing, right? So I think there's good arguments on both sides.
But like, for like the prison, the majority of humankind is not in prison. The majority is living out a moral life, and there are prisons and there are bad people in the world because of free will. We have the ability to choose between good and bad, and I think the majority of the time people are good. People try and do. I think a lot of time I agree. People are selfish, but oftentimes I think they're selfish when it comes to others too. They want to help the people around them. They could care less about some random person across the street, but they care about the people around them, which is somewhat selfish. You know what I mean?
Right, it is because you like those people.
Yeah, you like those people,
and you want their well-being, so that you're happy.
So I would argue that being selfish isn't necessarily bad because you're not trying to hurt others. You're just trying to help people around you, and people can be selfish just towards themselves. They can try, but that might also mean that they're just trying to live out their best life and they're trying to focus on themselves in that given moment. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't think Christianity or Christian doctrine would be like, selfishness. It's not all that bad. I mean, as a general rule, but I can see what you're saying. I mean, I don't think selfishness is always bad.
So would you?
That's why I don't like taxes.
Yeah. Would you agree with me that? Would you agree at least that? I'm trying to figure out how I can word this so it could be somewhat agreeable. Would you agree that since as a society we've reached quite a high level of morality as a society as a whole, that there must be some good within us? There has to be some good within us.
Yeah, there absolutely is some good within us.
And I believe that the majority of us are fundamentally good. I think at our core, we want what's best for us and the people around us. The majority of us, at least. Would you?
Yeah. Well, I think we do, but the thing is, our perception of what is good has changed throughout history, right? The same people in times of slavery would say, yeah, I want to do what's good for people around me, while they're, whipping their slaves in the backyard.
Yeah.
So I think the standard of good has changed. So if God is giving us morality everlastingly, right? It's timeless.
Oh, you are frozen right now. Oh, continue. You're good now.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
So I was saying if we have gone through these periods where our morality has changed, what we think and what we know is right and wrong has changed.
Mm-hmm.
If God and his morality are timeless, which Catholic and Christians believe, then why has it changed? It doesn't answer that question. Yeah. And why does it contradict the teachings in the Bible? So right? Whether we want to attribute those to God or we want to conveniently excuse them.
Okay. So on your first point was, can you remind me of your first point again?
Why has our morality changed over time if God gives it to us and God is everlasting?
Yeah. So I believe that the morality that God hopes for us has not changed. That has not changed ever. That's a personal belief of mine. We have moved more. I think over time we have seen a movement towards that morality. Like you brought up, we had slavery. That was an awful thing, and now we've progressed from that, and we can realize it's objectively wrong. I think we're moving towards the place that God wants us to be, but I don't think we started out there, and I don't think we're there yet. I think we're trying to discover it as we go on, because we have free will. We weren't able to just be given that under Christian doctrine. We were given free will, so we have to try and find it ourselves within each other. We have to try and over time discover what morality had been laid out for us.
So maybe we thought what we were doing back then was moral, but it really wasn't.
It really wasn't. It really wasn't. And
but then,
continue.
The problem is, how do we know what we're doing right now is moral? Pastrana? Hello?
Hello?
Okay, so the problem with that is, how do we then know that what we're doing right now is moral and is what God wants us to do? So, if throughout thousands of years we've been doing it wrong, how do we know that right now we're correct?
We don't. We don't know right now that we're correct.
So how can we say that there is a standard of morality?
So
certain things have to be good and certain things have to be bad. We would have said the same thing 200 years ago while we owned slaves.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that at that time they believed that was morally acceptable. But I think we need to live out what we believe is what we see as morality. We need to live that out, and I think right now we're not in a state right now that we are perfectly moral. I don't think we're there yet, but I think as morality changes over time, we're getting closer to that. So while we may be wrong right now, can we both agree that over time we've gone to a better place of morality as a society?
I certainly think so.
And we've done that by following our morals. We've done that by following what we believe to be right. It may not have been a right at the time, but it's bringing us closer and closer to this goal. So I agree. We don't know what we're doing right now is right. It may not be. But as long as we keep following that, humankind as a whole can continue to progress towards that final destination of morality. That's the way I see it. That's the way I perceive it, at least.
Yeah, no, I just think it's a little too convenient to the things that we like about the Bible. Oh yeah, God, he totally meant that. Yeah. But the things we don't like, we say, oh well, I mean, he couldn't have meant that. I mean, he only repeated it over and over and over again, apparently. But we'll just it's too convenient to excuse it. And the fact that those things are in there suggests that God had nothing to do with it and that people wrote it down, because then the context of the time could actually apply to what they were writing down.
But the context of the time can apply to it because it isn't divine
not
intervention.
Not if it's God's demand theory. Not if it's his.
But you're taking the assumption that it's divine intervention, which is not. I don't believe it's divine. I think it's divine inspiration. I think it's inspired by God in its wills, His wills.
Yes.
And I think since it's divine inspiration and not divine intervention, it's inspiration. That does not mean every single word was what he believed to be true, or what we know as God to believe what he believed is morally accurate.
So how do you know that God wants us to love each other? Because that contradicts what God also inspired in, for example, like homosexuality, for example, or killing people that are witches, right? So, thanks, God, for helping us out on that one.
So,
why do you handpick the things you like?
We'll go another second. So, 2 minutes ago, we both agreed that we're moving as a society over time to a more moral place, right? We're moving to a more moral. We're moving to a moral high ground, right? We agreed on that.
I certainly think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And can you agree that over that time, part of that transition towards a higher morality has been loving each other with more respect and treating each other with more respect?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. So I can say that I know this to be true because over time it has proven itself to be true.
Right. So you're saying if I think that we are more moral and I'm attributing morality to treating each other with respect, then that must mean that God's morality wanted us to treat each other in respect. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that because can we both agree that we are more accepting of other people right now than we ever have been before? Period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that we're moving more and more towards this, and this has been a common theme. this has been a common theme throughout time. Like, the more accepting we become of each other's ideas and our differences, the more we move towards a moral high ground. There's a direct correlation between the two.
Yes.
So what I'm
But
saying,
how? But what I'm saying is, how do you know that what we're doing now is the moral high ground?
I don't. Like I said before, I don't know. Right now, I don't think we're at perfect morality right now. I don't. I think we're moving towards it over time, and I think if we continue to live out our morality, we'll move towards that in the end.
But how do you know that loving and accepting each other is moral? I certainly think it is.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, how do you know that God is telling us that? Because God tells us exactly the opposite in some of the Bible, but he also tells us just that in some of the Bible.
I would argue that he spends more... There's more inspiration from God talking about... There's more verses in the Bible talking about loving others than there is about hate. I would argue that there's more of that.
I really don't know. In the New Testament, oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in the Bible as a whole, I mean, I assume you don't know that for sure. I don't know that for sure, but
we'd have to count the verses together.
That's right. That seems like it's just, I think most of the Bible is neither supporting good things or bad things. I think it's just telling stories and events that happen. But I mean, the bad things that God tells us.
Can we both agree that there is more good in the New Testament than the Old Testament? Because it has the gospel,
absolutely, yeah.
So the way I view the Bible, and I don't know if this is within Lutheran doctrine or Catholic doctrine even for that, but I see the Old Testament more as the history leading up. It's more of a historical. It's more of a story. It's more of a series of stories leading up to the birth of Christ, and I think that's where the moral. Because if you believe in Christianity, you believe Jesus was the Messiah, and that what he preached was God's morality, correct?
Yeah.
And I think for sure we can at least agree in the New Testament, more of it is fundamentally good than bad.
Absolutely.
By a large majority. So I think that's where we see. I think that's where we get our morality from. More of the New Testament. I see the Old Testament almost as a story and like a path of showing how morality had been built up to that point.
So just to clarify, we both think that the Jews and the Muslims are insane in believing that this is the word of God.
Yeah, I don't think there's a valid argument for saying this is the direct word of God.
I mean, yeah, there can't be. You would be, if that was the word of God, then God is the most hateful, evil thing ever.
It violates one of the core principles that's in the Old Testament itself, which is free will. Because if he was intervening in the minds of his people and telling them what to write down exactly, that is the opposite of free will. Can we agree on that?
Well, I don't think they were. I don't think God was forcing people to write this down.
No, I'm saying
these prophets were hearing what God was saying and writing it down. Muslims don't believe that Allah forced upon Muhammad to write down this stuff. They just believe Muhammad was a prophet, and he was the one who heard this. So I don't think really it has anything to do with free will necessarily.
But a lot of the stuff in the Old Testament wasn't even written by those prophets. It was written about the prophets, but a lot of it wasn't even written by them. It was written by people of the time, scholars of the time.
Right, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, not everything was written by... Well, I think they would still consider those people prophets, though.
Yeah, I
just like we would consider Jesus a prophet, and they would say, oh, no, Jesus wasn't a prophet. He was just a dude at the time.
They would have to consider them prophets. Like, anyone who had a helping hand in the Bible, you would have to say they're a prophet because God had to have been telling them what to write down. Or it had to be... If they believe it's the word of God, God would have to be telling them what to write down. It's the only way that's possible.
Yeah. So there's two more things that I want to talk about, and one of them is a thing that I haven't ever talked to you about before, so that'll be interesting. But first, the topic of suffering and stuff that we've been talking about the past few days. So I've thought about what you're saying in that, there's some things we can't see that in order for something good to happen, we need some suffering is necessary for that good to happen, right? And maybe sometimes the good even outweighs the bad, right?
Yeah.
The problem with that is it's using the ends justify the means mentality by definition, right?
Okay.
The
Yeah.
end is really good. The means don't matter because we want to achieve the end. So
Yeah.
yes, there's suffering, but the end goal. And in our philosophy course, in every single ethics course you will take, they will tell you the ends never justify the means, except for with God. Like how does that work?
So that's actually something that I've struggled with as a Christian. Like the ends never justify the means, and I often find I'll admit it, this is one of the I believe the faults that I can't wrap my brain around it. I'm trying to understand from a deeper point, and it doesn't necessarily change my faith, but it makes me not question it, but it makes me more curious than anything else. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right now, all I can do is have faith, and I know that that's something that's not possible for everyone, but I can have faith. But while I'm having faith, I can also try and prove what I'm trying to. I can try and prove my faith. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
no, I don't think the suffering argument kills my ability to believe in religion. I think it tarnishes it though, or it leaves some holes empty where I'm like, okay, that doesn't make sense.
From what I believe, I don't think that statement is always true. That the ends don't justify the means. I don't.
Really. So, for example.
So given the option between having the suffering we have in the world and then having no world at all, what would you pick?
Well, I would pick the suffering that we have.
Yeah, so you would agree that in that situation the ends do justify the means because we get the opportunity to exist.
Well, yeah, but we're not doing the means at that point are just existing. We're not doing anything to reach an end goal. We're not doing something to not reach an end goal. So it's not the same thing necessarily as the ends justify the means.
So let's say you were God, right? And you could either create a world, you could either create life, knowing that there might be some suffering within it, or you would never be able to create life at all. Which one would you pick?
Well, if I'm God, I would pick the third option, which is create life, allow free will suffering, but don't allow natural suffering like diseases and natural disasters, right? Because those are things that Christians believe are in God's control, right? Even if you don't believe in the Old Testament stories of God controlling the weather, like Noah's Ark and the parting of the Red Sea, just to name a few, in the New Testament, there are examples of things happening like that too, like Jesus, he calms the sea, right? If you believe that Jesus truly was divine, then you would believe that story is true. So we know God's capable of this, but the fact that he doesn't do anything to stop it is what's concerning. Like the tsunami in 2004 killed 230,000 people, right? That's insane. There was no free will involved in that. God is capable of stopping that, yet he chooses not to. And I can't wrap my head around why he would allow that to happen.
Yeah, well, so the closest thing I've been able to find to an answer to that is what I sent you the other day, that article. I have it right here. So there is a scientist, theologian. His name is John. I'm not gonna say it's like Polkinghorn.
His last name,
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm reading directly from the site here. He suggests that God has created a universe with particular natural laws that make life on Earth possible, so that humans with free will can exist in the first place. As an example, the first weather systems that create tornadoes that kill humans also create thunderstorms that provide our environment with water needed for human existence. The same plate tectonics that kill humans in earthquakes are necessary for regulation of soils and surface temperatures needed for human existence. So, the first time I read this, this was like the answer I've been looking for. But as I look deeper, I agree there still are some flaws. Like, if it can create weather, why does it have to do damage in the first place? You know what I'm saying?
Right. Why can't he produce the good end result without the suffering if he truly is all powerful?
And so at first I thought this was one of the most interesting things I've ever read, and the more I thought about it, I realized that flaw, that's still a flaw within the system. So the only conclusion that I've come to thus far, and this can change because this is still pretty new to me, this concept,
right?
And and I don't think you're gonna like the conclusion, is that because as Christianity we don't see God as like providential, right? We don't see him acting out in our daily lives, right?
Well, he did, according to the Old Testament and New Testament, he did an awful lot of stuff back then, and now he just doesn't feel like doing it anymore.
He was acting through people, acting through prophets, and acting through.
Well, not necessarily. He was in the Old Testament. He wasn't necessarily acting through prophets, unless you want to completely ignore half the Bible.
Well, like I said before, I don't want to ignore the Bible because I think the Old Testament has some truth to it, but I see it more as a story, like as more of a story part.
No,
I
understand.
So since God isn't providential, and I think that while he is all powerful, there had to be a natural order of things that had like the world had to work in a certain way for it to be possible.
Wait a minute. I'm thinking about it. Saying God is not providential completely contradicts Christianity at its core. The idea of Christianity is that God is so present in our lives. He is constantly attentive to us. He is constantly answering our prayers. He is constantly around us. When we need someone to turn to, God is always there for us. God is active in our creation. He's active in our well-being. You can't say God is not providential. Christians believe God is so providential that he is everywhere around us at all times. It's the exact opposite. God is extremely providential in Christianity.
Some of the examples you gave weren't necessarily correct, though.
Such as?
Christianity doesn't believe that he like answers all prayers. Like that's not what they believe.
Well, he listens. I should have specified. He listens. But that's still an example of him being providential. He is actively involved in our lives.
I think what I meant when I said providential, I think he doesn't have he doesn't act directly in our world that often. He listens to us. He's there for us. He is someone we can talk to through prayer. He's someone we can ask for forgiveness from for our sins. But I don't think he's acting out like in a sense that he is
like producing results in our world.
I don't think he's micromanaging every single thing in our world. That's what I meant by God not being providential, because he is to some extent. I see where you're coming. Like I agree. To some extent, he does act out in our world. Like, if he wasn't providential, he wouldn't be listening to our prayers. He wouldn't be that. So I agree that he's not. Continue.
If you're gonna say that God, he's present and he's listening, but he doesn't physically interfere, that doesn't really explain why, for example, when someone is cured of cancer, they say, "Oh, thank God, my prayers are answered." Right? When good things happen in our lives, we attribute it to God being good. But when children by the thousands are ripped from their parents and drowned, we say, oh, well, I mean, God can't be involved in everything, right? It's an excuse. It's an excuse. We attribute good things that happen to God, and we attribute bad things that happen to nature. And we say it's completely disconnected from God and what he does.
Well, I don't think it's completely disconnected. I would not make that argument, because it has to be connected. Because if you're taking the premise that he created the universe, he has to be connected to what happens to nature somehow.
Well, I meant that he doesn't actively try to interfere, for example, to stop a tsunami, which we all agree he is capable of. Yet he chooses to let it drown innocent children. Who, by the way, which is my next big issue, and this is, I cannot rationalize. Like, there are some counter arguments to the suffering thing, like, well, you know, maybe it's mysterious, maybe we can't explain, maybe God has a plan, stuff like that. I can't wrap my head around this, and it is not only I made sure this wasn't just Catholicism, but it is in Lutheran. I know that for sure because I looked it up, and so I'm assuming it's in Christianity as a whole, because it's such a core belief, and it is the difference between heaven and hell. So Catholics, and not just Catholics, Christians believe that in order to go to heaven, you must embrace Jesus Christ, right? You must believe in him. Jesus, he died for us. No, that is absolutely true, and I will read you countless Bible quotes, and that is doctrine. That is absolutely Christian doctrine. You might not agree with it, but it is absolutely. So BibleMesh.com.
I don't think that's true. I don't believe that's true within Lutheranism. Because one of the
I made sure to double check that Jesus is required to get into heaven. do we need to embrace Jesus to get to heaven? All right. So I got it from lcms.org. That was one of the ones. And then the other one was like Lutheran. It might have been the ELCA. But I made sure to do research on this before I said it. And Jesus himself, if you believe the New Testament is true, Jesus himself in John 14:6, he says, Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. John 3:36, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. But whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them. Jesus himself said this. This is preached in the Bible countless times, and it still is in Christian doctrine today.
So just for one point of clarification, you brought your source was LCMS, right?
That was one of them.
Okay, and do you know what your other sources were?
Yes, I'll click on it right now. It is Lutheran Hour Ministries. Okay. What Lutherans believe under About the Bible. No, not yes. That's the link that I saved.
Okay.
Both of these are organizations. They were the first links that came up. This isn't like I had to search to get my point across. This is a belief of Christian doctrine, and it's a hateful one.
Well, it's not a belief because so do you know how much do you know about Lutheranism as a whole?
I've been my family is my whole dad's side of my family is
Lutheran?
Catholic.
Oh,
my mom, my mom's side, however, is Lutheran. So I was baptized Lutheran. I've been raised as a Lutheran, and I know that they aren't as strict about the things in the Bible as Catholics are. They don't, worship saints as much. I think they don't. We did a whole study on this back in my 8th grade religion for a semester where we compare the different branches of Christianity.
Yeah.
My problem is that according to Christian doctrine, all those little kids who are innocently drowned, and God allows it to happen, are then going to be tortured for eternity in hell. And it's not just because they don't believe in Jesus. It's not just Christianity that believes this. Judaism believes the only way to be saved is to follow the Torah. Islam believes the only way to be saved is to disagree with all other gods and only follow Allah and his rules. This is a core principle in pretty much all religions that I've studied.
Yep.
The major 3 that I've studied. How can you rationalize that, and how can you say that the Christian God is a moral God, but at the same time, just by chance of birth, you're doomed to an eternity of fiery torture in hell?
So I don't believe that. I disagree with that statement. I don't think that people.
So you think Christian doctrine is wrong?
No, I think that
you just said you disagree with Christian doctrine, so you think it's wrong.
I agree with LCMS doctrine. LCMS. That's the church that is the branch of Lutheranism that church is under. Most Minnesota Lutheran churches are under the ELCA, which is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is they're similar, but they have separate beliefs. And throughout my time going to church, I've always been taught that you do not have to. People who weren't born in situations where they grew up knowing God, but they still lived out moral lives, they can still get into heaven, because that is a fundamental belief of the Lutheran Church I'm a part of.
Okay, well, that's not a Christian teaching, and it's especially not a Catholic teaching. So you think that all the times he talked about it, all the times it was said in the New Testament, those were all wrong?
No, I think you're taking a direct interpretation, like a very literal interpretation of those.
How do you interpret this? I'll read it again. How do you interpret this figuratively? I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me.
Yeah.
And then the next one, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. But whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them. That is incredibly specific. You cannot read that figuratively.
No, I'm not saying figuratively. I'm saying I interpret it differently than you're stating it.
What did you just say?
I interpret it differently than you are stating it.
Okay, but your doctrine does not. Catholic doctrine does not.
I'm not Catholic, and I'm not. whatever.
Christian doctrine as a whole. I mean, that's a part of every religion. That's a major belief that you need.
But it's not, okay. So would you agree that besides like, if we don't take into account religion, for the most part, we usually say that we share the same morals, correct?
Me and you personally?
Yeah, we oftentimes we share the same morals.
Yeah, I'd say me and you agree on almost everything. Yeah,
we pretty much agree on what right and wrong, like what the actual right and wrong thing is to do, right?
Yes.
So I believe when God is like when you talk about like the only way to heaven is through God, is through Jesus. I think of that more as through his teachings. Like as long as you're following those teachings, which you're not even Lutheran, but you still somewhat follow those teachings of loving your neighbor, right? You have respect for other people, correct? You respect other people's opinions, right? You treat them as you want to be treated, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with Christianity as a whole, but I would argue that as long as you follow those teachings, which you technically are following, even though you're not doing it because of that, you're still following them, you will still be in heaven. You will still get there. Because you are living out a moral life according to what Jesus taught was moral.
Right, but you are rejecting Jesus as the Son of God.
I am not rejecting
that. No, I'm saying these people in other countries are. They're saying, no, Jesus wasn't the Son of God. I don't believe that. This is part of Christian doctrine. I have another source, BibleMesh.com. Their slogan is Trusted Theological Education. This is directly copy and pasted from their website. Can someone who doesn't believe in the Christian God go to heaven? No. Some may consider this bad news. In reality, though, it's the best news imaginable because it opens heaven's doors to even the worst sinners if they will only turn away from their sin and trust God's word. So in other words, the worst sinners, so for example, someone who rapes and murders someone, need only to turn to God and they'll go to heaven. But if that poor little Asian baby who's a Hindu dies in a tsunami, well, eternal suffering in hell. I mean,
that's not the religion. That's not what I believe. That's not what my church teaches. That's not what they spread. That's not at all the message that they're teaching.
But that is part of the doctrine. You would not talk to any Christian priest. You would never talk to a priest who said, "Nah, you don't need to believe in Jesus. You can say Jesus is a lie and still get to heaven." Absolutely not. I mean,
I would argue that you can.
But you think that the doctrine would agree with you?
I think
you think if you told a priest, if someone rejects Jesus blatantly, they have been taught Jesus and they say, yeah, I don't really believe that. I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. I don't believe in the Trinity. I don't really agree with some of the laws that are taught in the Bible. You think that person is going to come on into heaven?
Well,
Jesus
says the Bible says they won't. They live out a life in direct contradiction to the Bible. They directly contradict.
Not necessarily. They may live a good moral life, but they may just reject Jesus as the Son of God. And according to both Catholic and Christian doctrine, according to Jesus himself, according to several verses in the Bible, in the New Testament specifically, that means they will go to hell if they do not embrace Jesus as the Son of God.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I don't see. I agree.
You just disagree. You just disagree with Christian doctrine, or part of it at least. You disagree.
I don't agree with my church's doctrine. That's not true. My church's doctrine may disagree with some other Christian church's doctrine, but I agree with my church's doctrine.
Okay, Pastrana, but like if my Catholic church says one thing is okay, but Catholic doctrine as a whole says it's wrong, that doesn't mean that my version of Catholicism is correct.
The Evangelical Lutheran Church of America does not believe that. I at least I'm pretty sure they don't.
The ELCA?
ELCA.
Teaching. Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Faith and sin, teaching of life and faith. Life, we have another one. I'm trying to read. I don't see it on this page. Like, I don't think they're talking about it. This is just their homepage, like what they believe in. Here, getting into heaven. Because I really am interested, and I mean, the fact that this is a belief of the first two Lutheran churches that popped up, and
Well, I
one
don't
of
know.
them might.
Actually, I don't know why they're the first ones to pop up because I believe the ELCA is the largest Lutheran branch in the United States. If I'm not mistaken, it may not. It might be the biggest one.
Right. Well,
but
those were just the ones that.
It's one of the largest for sure. Yeah, so they have 3.5 baptized members, 3.5 million baptized members in the United States.
So, do you agree that the Catholic view of hell is insanely immoral?
Yeah, no, I agree.
And evil. It is truly evil. It's despicably evil.
I don't see a God that would reject someone from heaven just based on circumstance.
Yeah. And at the same time, God creates those same kids in his image. So he's creating them to essentially be doomed. So God knows they're not going to embrace Jesus.
But can we agree that if the doctrine was that as long as you live out that moral life, you may not get to that moral life the same way as a Christian may, but as long as you live out a good life, there's still a chance you get to heaven. Would you agree that that is a more accepting God and a more forgiving God?
One that would allow anyone into heaven regardless of religion as long as they follow his moral path?
Yeah. That is
I would agree that is, but unfortunately that, to my knowledge, is not, that it's certainly not what Catholicism believes, and to my knowledge, I don't believe that is.
I have fundamental problems with Catholicism. I think there's a lot of flaws, and I think it directly contradicts itself quite a bit. And I think those contradictions are less apparent in Lutheran churches as a whole. I still think they happen in some different branches of Lutheranism, but I think I've grown up as part of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, and that's what I've been taught since I was born. That's what I've known as Christianity. So that I can only speak from where I'm coming from on my understanding of this. I may have even in my time in this podcast contradicted it. Because I haven't read all the doctrine. I don't know many people that read all the doctrine of their religion. But from what I've gathered, going to church on Sundays, going to Sunday school, this is what I know and this is what I believe.
Yeah. So this link. I clicked on it from ELCA, and it directed me to livinglutheran.org. So I would assume they agree with it if it's bringing me to there. And it said, quote, they're using this Bible verse to support their beliefs. Those who believe in him, they're referring to Jesus, are not condemned. But those who do not believe are condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God. Mm-hmm. That's on livinglutheran.org, and the ELCA supports that. I mean, and this isn't surprising, Matt. It doesn't surprise me that this is a widely held piece of doctrine from Christianity, and because it is in all religions. All religions believe
but it all comes down to the understanding. It all comes down to what you understand as rejecting God or rejecting Jesus Christ. It comes down to what you consider rejecting him.
This says believe in him. Those who believe in him are not condemned. Those who do not believe are condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God. You have to really stretch it, Matt, to say that this doesn't say you need Jesus to be saved. You really do.
You need his teachings. That's what I'm trying to get at. You need his teachings.
What do you mean you need his teaching? The Lutheran Church, Pastrana, believes that you need to believe in Jesus.
Okay, so
as the Son of God, not just believe in Jesus, as the Son of God.
I have a proposition, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously neither of us is a true expert on doctrine, right? We can both agree none of us know every word of doctrine truly, right?
No, that's why I read sites that explain it for me.
So why don't we reach out to different we can do this in another video. We can reach out to different religions, different priests, whatever their hierarchy is. We reach out to them and ask them this question, and we see what responses we get.
I think that's a convenient way to dodge it now.
No, but
you can't explain why your religion believes that.
No, I want to know more about this interpretation. I want to know more about it. You have me curious. I'll admit it. You have me curious, but I need to contact people. We both need. I think the best way to move forward is to talk to people who are more familiar with doctrine than we are. Right?
I think livinglutheran.org and Evangelical Lutheran Church of America are pretty credible sources.
Yeah, okay. I agree, but I think I think we should do this to multiple religions, not just Lutheranism. We should ask it, because this is, I agree, if this is true, it's problematic. But I don't think this is I don't think this is the teachings. I don't think.
But Pastrana, it's so specific. It's literally down word for word. You do not need to take anything out of context to come to my conclusion. You need to spin it so much to say that, nope, it has nothing to do with believing Jesus to get into heaven. You really do. That's why every single webpage I've looked at has said, yeah, there's no other way to put it. Sorry, you gotta believe in God. They say it is so clear within the Bible, and they've applied that to their doctrine.
Okay, so if you are right on this, I agree that I'm gonna have to. I don't know the best way to respond to this. I simply don't. I would need to talk to people that know more than I do. So I think that the best way to move forward is to get in contact with those people and see the responses we get.
Okay, but we can also look up the same question and get responses from professionals, and from priests and from church sites.
But how about, can we just agree that let's just do this, all right? Let's just see responses. It'll be a good video. We'll just see what the responses are, and if this is true, then.
No, I agree, but I also think that would be extremely anecdotal, regardless of the result. I assume we would both be told, yeah, you need Jesus to be saved, just because that's what the doctrine itself apparently says. Not just in Catholicism, but in Christianity as well. Lutheranism, right? But let's say a priest did say, no, I don't necessarily think that. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's his word versus Lutheran doctrine, right? That wouldn't prove your point that, oh no, my religion doesn't. That, see, I talked to a priest and he told me.
But
right?
Okay, I don't see a God that would reject people just because of circumstance. I don't. That is why I'm not a Christian. That's not what I've been taught growing up, Christian. That is not what I've been taught at all.
Pastrana, what you have been taught and the reality of the doctrine you follow don't have to be the same.
They don't have to be the same. I agree.
For example, I've been taught that
doesn't make my position any less valid, though. That doesn't make my position any less valid.
No.
Yeah, so I can still come from a place of faith and believe in a God that would be forgiving towards others that grew up in different circumstances. I can still believe that. That doesn't make God the possibility of a God any less possible.
I'm not arguing against the possibility of a God. I'm saying this is why I would never be able to follow Christian doctrine and be a Christian, because they believe that God puts these kids on the earth through his love and compassion and then dooms them to an eternity of suffering because they just happen to be raised in the wrong culture.
I don't think this is if this is true Lutheran doctrine, then that's problematic for me. That is a huge hole within the church then. But that's not what my church is taught. That's just not true.
Well, you just said the ELCA is the church you belong to, right? I pulled up other sources and you said, no.
Yeah,
here, look at this source. This is what I believe. And that source agreed that you need to believe in Jesus as the Son of God to go to heaven.
I know you're going to say that this is spinning, but I see that as more of you need to follow his teachings more. That's the only way I can.
So why do they it's very specific, because they have not believed in the name of the only Son of God. They're very specific in its connection to him being the Son of God. Mm-hmm. That is what you need to believe. If you believe Jesus was some guy, that means you don't believe that Jesus descended into hell and opened up the gates of heaven for us, which is a core piece of Christian across the board doctrine. That was Jesus's purpose, was to give us God's teaching and to open up the gates of heaven, right? Mm-hmm. So if you believe Jesus was some guy, then you believe he had nothing to do with the opening of heaven. You believe that Jesus is just ordinary, and therefore you don't believe in the Holy Trinity because you don't believe in Jesus being divine. And that goes against what I keep saying Catholics, what Christians believe in terms of how you get into heaven and how you get into
You're assuming that being Christian, you don't have to agree with 100% of everything the church teaches. You simply don't.
You're right, but the heaven and hell principles of Christianity are key fundamental parts.
They are.
Heaven and hell is a fundamental part of Christianity. It's not, oh yeah, don't eat meat on
But
Fridays.
Even Lutherans and Catholics disagree on how you get to heaven. They disagree with that. They disagree on how you get there. That's one of the fundamental differences between the two.
But they all agree that you need Jesus in order to be saved. At least the doctrine does.
You need Jesus' teachings to be saved. You need to live out that moral life he lays out.
Matt, that might be your interpretation, which is a nice interpretation of it, but that is I'm sorry, that's just not. And like you said, some Lutheran followers or Catholic followers might not believe that.
Yeah.
But that does not mean that the doctrine and the teachings of that religion don't believe that. Right? Like if I'm a Muslim and I say, "Oh, I don't really believe that pork is bad. I eat bacon every morning for breakfast." That doesn't now mean that Islam supports eating bacon, right?
Yeah.
Right? So just because you have been taught this Lutherans.
I think if you ask the majority of Christians in general, they will agree that what I'm saying is more not what I think if you ask the majority of Lutherans, they will agree that it's deeper than just accepting Christ. It's deeper than that.
Well, they might say it's deeper than that, but at the same time, they would essential piece of it, because Matt, they wouldn't have that on their website if it had nothing to do with it. They just wouldn't. They're using that as an example.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sole quote they use on the. Oh no, there's one other one. Wait, it just has a number, so I don't know what passage that is from.
Can you send me the link on Discord?
Yep. So I will send you the link, and then I will send you. I'm on my Holy Angels laptop right now.
Oh, okay. Can you email it to me?
I don't have
it on my phone.
Yeah. I'll email it to you. And then I'll give you the page. But again, what you're doing right now is you're in disbelief, right? You disbelieve the first two sources I listed, and you gave me a source, and your source said the exact same thing, and now you're like, well, that can't be. That's just a lack of knowing your own faith.
Yeah,
I don't mean that in an offensive way.
No, I know you don't mean it in an offensive way, but I just want to clarify that I am by no means an expert in Lutheran doctrine. I only know what I've been taught thus far in life.
But this isn't an expertise subject, Matt. I don't think I'm an expert. No, it's not. This is the key fundamental concepts of heaven and hell. That is the essential piece of heaven and hell, is Jesus being divine.
Yeah,
that is not something that an expert needs to tell you.
I do believe Jesus is divine. I didn't disagree with anything you said there.
Well, no, they believe he is divine in the process of heaven and hell, and therefore he is required in order to be saved.
I honestly think that is more. It's deeper. I think it's deeper than that. I think that you're taking it at surface value. I think you have to look deeper into it.
Okay, I actually just found out that this is actually part of Luther's catechism, the first commandment. This is part of their first commandment of their catechism. Mm. It's just getting more and more specific, Matt. I don't think there's any way to try to spin it and interpret. You really do have to spin it. I'm sorry, you can't.
I am spinning
literally
it. I'm spinning it to what I interpret it to be.
Well, right, but at that point, you're disagreeing with Lutheran doctrine. You believe, you said that if that were true, that's problematic and hateful. You believe a core part of your doctrine is hateful.
The first step towards Reformation is disagreement. So I'm saying,
right.
There's still a chance. If this is true, there's still a chance for Reformation, and this can be changed.
But you currently believe that part of your doctrine is hateful, correct?
No, I believe that.
I'm not saying you shouldn't believe. I'm not saying you shouldn't be a Lutheran because of that. I'm just saying, do you agree that aspect of your religion is very problematic, as you admitted it would have been if it was true, and then we just showed that it was true and that it is part of the doctrine.
All right, I'm gonna kind of dodge the question, but I'm gonna answer it. Okay.
Okay.
Under your interpretation of what that means, yes, I do think it's hateful. Under my
This is
interpretation,
wait.
no, I
This
don't.
is not my interpretation. This is the Lutherans' doctrines.
Well, technically, anything's up to interpretation. That's just the way it works. You can interpret it whichever way you want.
Matt, you can. That's an easy way to avoid facts. That's like you presenting me with something and me saying, "Oh, well, I interpret that differently. Therefore, it is this." We can't dismiss the source.
No, but faith is different than facts. It's a faith based. Religion is faith based.
You're right, but the doctrine is supposed. It's believed to be truth. Mm-hmm. Doctrine is the whole point of doctrine.
Doctrine has changed throughout the ages.
It has, but we're not talking about what was Lutheran doctrine 100 years ago. We're talking about what is it right now. And your own sources, which you said, no, look at this place.
Yeah, and
I looked at that place, and it said the same thing. Their interpretation, which is the official Lutheran doctrine, disagrees with your interpretation.
Yes, I agree. But if your interpretation of it is what the Lutheran Church is trying to get at, right?
That is what they're. I'm not interpreting anything here,
no,
Matt.
You are
reading directly from their page.
But that doesn't mean that we can't. Just because you don't agree with something that's part of Christianity, like a portion of Christianity, doesn't mean that you can't still be Christian and that you want to seek reformation of that one.
That's exactly what I just said to you. I just said this doesn't mean you shouldn't be a Lutheran if you disagree with this.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of pointing it out, and I'm just saying from an agnostic point of view, that is one of the reasons that I would never be able to be a Christian, is because I don't think that I don't think a moral God would allow for that. And so if I'm being taught that a moral God does,
that's almost lazy. You're saying you wouldn't be something, but you aren't willing to change it. You aren't willing to try and change it.
What do you mean?
Because let's say, for example, that you're saying this is one of the fundamental reasons you can't be Lutheran, right?
Yes.
I feel like if this is like one of the only reasons you can't be Lutheran, then I feel like it's lazy to say that you wouldn't be Lutheran just because of this reason, because there's always the chance, there's always the option for Reformation. You can be a Lutheran if you so choose to be, and you can seek Reformation and change this.
But you could apply the same thing to any religion. Yes. I could ask you Pastrana, or I could say I'm not a Muslim, right? I don't agree with Muslim, and you could say, oh well, that's lazy. You don't want to help reform Islam. What? No, that has nothing to do with it.
Okay, so question.
Sure.
If you had to pick one religion that you were the closest to, what would it be? If you had to pick one that you were the closest ideologically to.
Christianity.
Christianity, more specifically.
From what I know, Lutheranism.
Lutheranism. All right.
Yes.
So would it not be easier to change Lutheranism because you're already so close to agree with it than it is to change Islam because you so vastly disagree with it? It's different.
Yes, but if you're gonna say that's lazy, then choosing the easier thing, which you're saying I should do, lazy. No, so it doesn't really support the argument that it's being lazy.
Lazy was a bad choice of words. What I'm trying to say is that you shouldn't completely
write off a religion
because of one aspect of it. If these aspects are changeable through Reformation.
The problem is, though, and we talked about this with Islam, we said, well, I hope there's a Reformation. And I thought about it a little more, and I don't know that it's possible because they believe the Quran is the literal word of God. Yes, and how do you change the word of God, right? So when I'm told exactly what Jesus said several times, and then I'm told what other people said he said several times.
This brings us back to the point of the difference between divine inspiration and divine intervention.
No, it's not, because this is the New Testament is supposed to be historical, right? They witnessed Jesus. It's the witnesses of Jesus. So it's not a set of rules.
It still is subject to some, because there is still some negative aspects of the New Testament.
But not really from Jesus. Not from Jesus. Except for this. This is rather.
So it's still subject to the same treatment that it's. that there is room for interpretation, because there is.
Okay, but again, if you're going to make that argument, then we don't know what Jesus taught. We will never know what Jesus taught
You're
if
right,
you
but
use that argument.
but we can try and move towards more of a place where we think he's taught, where we think was his message.
Right, but at that point, what we think could be anything. Because anything, if you're saying what you're saying is true, that, oh, well, this might have been, misinterpreted. Or the Bible, the New Testament, Jesus, what he said could have been misinterpreted.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay.
I'm saying
Are you trying to tell me?
I'm saying what could have been written down was not the direct word of God.
Well, right, and I don't think the New Testament intends it to be. They intend it to be what Jesus said, right? This is what Jesus said. So since you talked about consistencies in the Bible and basing morality off of that. Jesus consistently said this, or at least it was consistently said that he preached this. So if there is a consistency, did they get it wrong that many times?
No, many of the verses, that is just like many of the verses could be like, I agree that the verse used in that source is harder to spin. It's one of the hardest to spin.
It's impossible to spin.
No, okay, yes, it's
almost
impossible. It's almost impossible to spin. But many of the other verses are a lot easier to spin. A lot of them are way closer to what I'm saying.
So, like, whoever believes in the Son has eternal life, but whoever rejects the Son will not see life, for God's wrath remains on them. That seems rather specific.
No, I think that's one of the I think that can be clearly interpreted. That it's
so why have theologians and Christian scholars interpreted it the opposite way that you are?
Not all.
The smartest.
Not all.
Well, the ones who write the doctrine have. Would you not agree they are some of the smartest biblical scholars in all?
They are some of the smartest. They're some of the smartest people that have studied morality in their time. But as we've stated before, and we both agree.
Okay, well, today though, scholars today will disagree with you. They will say no. That means because they still write the doctrine.
Yeah, and scholars 50 years from now might be completely agreeing with me. They might even move past a point that I'm on right now. We're moving. We're moving closer. We don't know the future. We don't know. So, our goal should be to move towards what we think is that higher morality.
Yes, but the problem is, Matt, is that this is considered to be what the Son of God preached and said. Yes. It's not that God influenced the writers and they said, oh, I think this is what God wants. These people apparently are being told what God wants through Jesus. That's the whole point of the Gospels.
But you have to understand these for sure are not direct. Like the Gospels were written like decades after Jesus Christ.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, so I honestly, unless every single one of the Gospel writers had photographic memory, I don't think they specifically remember what Jesus said, word for word.
So then Jesus might not have ever said, "Love your neighbor."
No, but they understand the gist of the argument. They understand the gist of what he was saying. They understand the important parts. Like he may not have said exactly "love your neighbor" as you treat others as you want to be treated, but he said something like that.
Do you understand the problem with that logic, though, Pastrana? You're handpicking the things you like and saying, no, they remembered that properly from God, from Jesus. But they must have forgotten a little bit.
I'm saying that
it's so convenient.
No, it's not. It's just because it's all in the wording of each of those examples.
And the examples are extremely specific, as you mentioned. First, you said, "Oh, well, the examples, it's all about love. These are kind of hateful." And you said, "Well, who can know what Jesus really said?" And then I said, "Okay, well, did Jesus say good things?" And you said, "Well, of course."
No, we can know that because under the premise that Jesus and God are the moral high ground we strive to reach, right?
Yes.
That's the premise of Christianity, that Jesus and God.
Jesus is the perfect example of God's will.
Of God's will, okay?
Yes.
Can we both agree that, as stated before, we've moved more towards a place of that? We've moved more towards a higher morality.
Yes, I think we have.
And to get there, we've had to change doctrine throughout the ages. Christianity.
Yes, we have had to handpick which parts of the Bible we like and which we don't.
We've chosen which ones.
We just have.
No,
yes, we have.
We have chosen what. We have gotten rid of the stuff over time that no longer is with the morality that, because if we're moving in an upward direction, we are letting go of the stuff that is holding us back from that upward direction. Correct?
Yes.
So that still is possible. There still is room for change.
Well, yes, there is room for change, but my argument isn't, oh, down the line, 50 years from now, if Catholicism or if Christianity happens to change its doctrine, then I'll be on board. I'm saying right now, why I can't wrap my head around Christianity is because their doctrine teaches this hateful ideology. Not Christianity as a whole being hateful, I want to be specific, but that their view on heaven and hell is very hateful. And aside from the fact of believing in Jesus to get into heaven, I want you to ask yourself, Matt, what is wrong with spending an eternity in a fiery torment against your will? What's wrong with that?
It's the actions. It's not like you had no hand in getting there. It's not like you had no hand in getting to that place.
You're right.
You were evil enough to get there because of the actions you committed while on Earth. Okay, so it's eternal punishment. That's what it is.
Right. So, for example, if you commit a hate crime, right? I'm pretty sure God and Jesus, you would agree, that would be immoral. That would be a sin. If that person never confesses and never apologizes to God and says, "Oh, Jesus, love me, I'm so sorry," if he never does that, you think it's a fair consequence for him to be everlastingly tortured?
It depends on how he lives the rest of his life.
Well, let's say he doesn't do anything wrong, but say he beat up a Jewish person.
I can't say I know for sure with morality, because morality has changed over time. I can't say for sure what all it comes down to is that there's some parts that we don't understand, and that's what we leave up to faith. I can try and understand those things, and I will continue to try, but I just simply, as a human, I can't get there on my own.
I can't wrap my head around the idea that someone would be eternally tortured, not just punished and then it ends, but eternally in never-ending torment.
Okay, but
because you sinned.
I can see why you would disagree with, under the premises that you're stating. I can see why you could find Christianity troubling and you disagree with it, right? What I don't see is that is justification to believe in no God whatsoever.
I don't necessarily believe there is no God. That's the thing. I don't necessarily believe there is a God, but I don't believe there is no God. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. I hope there is. I really hope there is a and God, but there's no way.
What do you lose by believing that there is? By just simply starting to believe that there is?
I don't know. I would lose my time on Sundays. That's about it. You don't lose much, is my point. In believing, you don't lose much.
You don't lose much in believing. So why not try and strive for that? Why not try and strive to that? Because if you don't lose much, you have everything to lose, possibly.
Here's the thing. I will live my life with a moral compass, right? And I will hope that there is a loving and just God that, as a result of that, will reward me in heaven when I die, right?
Yeah.
I hope that's the case, right?
Yeah.
What I won't do is subscribe to Christianity's doctrine as a whole, because I find their view on heaven and hell very troubling. I also find the view on homosexuality troubling. I want to believe in a God. I don't necessarily think I can believe in the Christian religion just because of what they believe.
I want to move to a broader point now. Why not just start believing in a God, period? Why not just start? What's preventing you from doing so? I'm honestly just curious. What is preventing you from just believing in a God, period?
So you've probably heard the term when people say, "Oh, well, I'm spiritual. I'm not religious," right?
Yeah.
I believe that. I believe there has to be something. But I don't know what it is. I don't know how to prove it. I don't know if I can prove it. but I feel like there has to be something. I just don't think it is the God that is spelled out in Christianity.
But right there, you essentially stated that you believe there is a God. Maybe not a God, but a higher power at the very least.
Maybe not a God. I think there is. I think there is some sort of higher power. I don't know what form it takes. I don't know what it does. I just think there has to be something.
So technically you're not a true agnostic. You're not strictly agnostic. You're agnostic, but you're more towards the side of. If there's a spectrum,
here's the thing.
If there's a spectrum, you're more towards the side of believing of something than you are of not believing in anything.
Yes, but the reason I say I'm agnostic is I don't say, well, there is something. It may not be the Christian God, but there is something. I say, well, doesn't there have to be something? Right? I can't prove it. I can't prove there is something, but I can't prove there's not something. So I feel like the best way is just, okay, I'm just going to live a moral life. And if such a God exists that truly is good and compassionate, he will reward me for that, regardless of whether I eat meat on Fridays or what, things like that. So I believe there has to be something, but I don't believe that it has to exist or that it can't exist.
But
it's a big, vast ocean of gray area.
Yeah.
That it can't really be argued against because I don't have a strong stance on anything.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't necessarily think we're having an argument here. I think it's more of a discussion just about what we believe, because I'm not trying to prove to you that God can exist. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to explain to you why I don't think the Christian God is
you're trying to prove the point that the Christian God as a whole Christianity, the God that Christianity proposes, isn't necessarily as moral as people make him up to be. That's what.
No, yes, that is what I'm saying, and because of that, I would not subscribe myself and dedicate myself as a Christian. That doesn't mean I wouldn't ever believe that there is a God. I hope one day I find a strong spiritual connection and can believe in a God. But I cannot believe that God is moral and just and follow Christian doctrine at the same time. They're just not compatible.
What is preventing you from searching for this God? Because the way you worded that you hope to find a God.
Yes.
You hope to find him, but why not try and seek him out?
I absolutely do. That is why every day I watch Catholic videos from priests. I mentioned Ascensions Present, Acts 17 Apostolics, I think is the name of the challenge. I listen to David Wood. I love Dennis Prager. I listen to Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. I listen to people that believe there is a God.
Yeah.
Because I want to find a connection. But so far I can't find a connection to an organized religion.
So but can we agree that some of there's on both sides, some of the smartest people on both sides of the issue of God versus no God, on both sides, there's some of the smartest people in the world on both. Right? They're some of the
Yeah, that doesn't mean one is right and the other is wrong.
Because a lot I've heard the argument before that there's Christianity has all the smart people, or atheism are the people people who are
all the scientists are atheists,
and I think
that just proves God is
because I think it's important that we in this discussion we at least find some common ground, that we can agree that there are very intelligent people on both sides that have very passionate views on this issue.
And the thing is, consensus doesn't mean fact or truth, right?
No, I agree.
Like just because most smart people believe in God or most smart people don't believe in God wouldn't prove it. Just like at a time most smart people probably believed the earth was flat. Believe that God punishes us by breaking our legs when we trip.
That one of the least useful arguments is that there's only smart people on one side, because that really does not mean anything.
And it's just not true is the other problem. It doesn't mean anything, and there's no basis in truth in that claim that all the smart people agree with me.
Yeah.
And even if they do, so what?
Yeah. So some of the, like you said before, some of the smartest people in the world thought the earth was flat for the longest time.
Yeah. Or they thought black people were inferior to white people.
Yeah.
Scientists believed that for a long time.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that it was correct. It was completely incorrect.
So because it's important that we find common ground on something, because I think overall, since we share such a similar morality, we want to see the same thing from a God. We want to, because I think this entire time we've been arguing about like what the Christian God represents, but I think we both want him to represent the same thing. Is that what I'm understanding? We both want him to be, for the most.
We want the same thing in the God we.
Yeah.
Yes, we want the same things.
So and that's an important thing to make, because I think it's interesting to show that we can both want the same thing, but come at it from completely different perspectives.
Right. Well, but here's the problem is that according to you said, okay, maybe you have to believe in Jesus. Maybe you just have to follow in his ways.
Mm-hmm.
By that same logic, you would be going to hell by supporting the death penalty, right? Because Jesus said, never kill, love your enemies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're not following Jesus's exact teachings by your own definition of how to get into heaven and hell, according to what you believe Lutheran doctrine should be. You would not be going to heaven, because what you believe in is a grave sin according to Jesus himself.
Yeah, but that is also like, I think that can change over time, because like we've said before, morality has changed throughout the ages, right?
But you're getting into hypotheticals. You're saying, well, one day.
I mean, to be fair,
I'm talking about right now.
To be fair,
as of now,
like our entire conversation is completely hypothetical. This is all in the.
That's not true. Doctrine is not hypothetical. What the current doctrine is, because that's what this discussion is. Yeah. What Lutherans believe, that is not hypothetical. What happened historically could be hypothetical, you could say. But you're saying, okay, maybe way down in the future it'll change. As of right now, your own belief system would put you in hell for supporting what Jesus said was one of the gravest sins ever, in killing.
Good night. Yeah.
I just find that somewhat troubling, right? I don't think there's ever moral absolutes.
Yeah, no.
Well, I don't know. No, I don't think anything is ever always wrong.
Because okay, so I honestly don't know. Like we can never truly. Now, how do I want to say this? I believe that. I don't know how to word this, so it sounds.
Just spit it down, and I'll try to pick up what you're putting down.
Like the last two sentences, just so I can pick up right where you left off. Like, what was the last?
Okay, so I said, you are saying, well, maybe in the future, things will change, right? Like, oh, I hope it'll reform. As of right now, your own belief system would place you in hell because you support something that Jesus said is a grave sin.
Mm-hmm. All right, so there's two things I want to respond to that, and then after that you can respond, but we should probably start wrapping up because we've been.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I think we've said most of what we have to.
So, under Christianity and under a belief in a God that is forgiving, you have and understanding that there is free will in the world, people will make mistakes in their lifetime. It's inevitable. They will mess up. They will do something that they may even find morally wrong. They won't even understand how they could do such a thing right now, but maybe in 10 years next thing you know they're doing it, right?
Right.
And that's why having such a forgiving God is important, because maybe I'm completely wrong on the death penalty. Maybe the death penalty is completely wrong. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that. But because my God is forgiving, and that I have, for the most part, lived out a moral life in all other aspects for the majority of my time on earth, that is what will get me into heaven. That portion is what helps me get there.
Right. So then, for example, according to, Christian doctrine, if we look at like a serial killer, right? They kill this person and they rape them, and they turn their life around, and they're like, holy crap, that was so wrong. I raped and killed this young girl, innocent, just ended her life early. And they just start following God, and they say, God, I'm so sorry. That person is, get on the checklist. You're on God's, good list, and you're going to heaven.
I think that's way harder of a journey than you're making it, because that person is such in a morally problematic state that they're willing to do such an extreme and awful thing. It is.
Right.
The odds of them finding God after that it is possible, I admit it, and I don't know the way it works for 100%, but I do think that it is possible for them to find. I think it's extremely hard to get from there to a place where all of a sudden you're following the teachings of God, because that is such a direct contradiction. You have to do a complete 180, but it's not impossible.
But so is believing in the death penalty and then thinking the death penalty is morally reprehensible. That's a 180. But Matt, your whole argument this whole time has been based on possibilities for your support for Lutheranism. Well, I hope that possibly in the future we'll move it on.
There's only two things that I've based on Reformation. There's only two things that I would like to see changed currently, under my understanding of what you've presented me. The first being what you stated earlier about like the way people get into heaven, because if what you're saying is true, I don't necessarily agree with that. And the second is surrounding the death penalty, because that is one major area where I disagree with the Lutheran Church.
What about homosexuality being a sin?
I'm not.
I'd assume.
No, I don't.
Just being a sin, like you're a homosexual, you're a sinner.
I don't think it's a sin, but let me see. ECLA. Right.
I don't know what the Lutherans' teaching on this is, but as far as the Catholic school, Catholic schools, Catholicism, you would say homosexuality is not a sin. Matt, to answer my question, you don't need to look up Lutheran doctrine.
No, but
I just asked you personally. Well, no, I know, but I asked you personally. Do you think that
no, I do
it is wrong to believe homosexuality is?
Do I believe it's wrong to think that it's a sin, or do I?
Yes.
Okay. I don't believe it's a sin.
Okay, good. Yeah. I know my wording was confusing there. Not believe that it's not a sin.
I don't believe it's a sin. I don't see how, like, because that has been biologically proven to be like something that happens genetically. If God creates his children, why is he creating this gay child to be doomed to an eternity of torture? I've read.
How can you?
Yeah, no, but there are some like really weird conspiracy theories that we'll have to talk about later. But they are like really, like I'll have to tell you about them later. But is there? I think. I mean, this might be a discussion we continue some other time, because this has been very interesting. You've brought up points that I had not thought of. I hope that I've in some way kind of changed. In some way, kind of made you think differently. Yeah. I hope I have.
Well, I think I'll just add this. I think you misinterpreted my stance. I think you thought that I didn't believe in a higher power, because I think that's why you brought up the whole physics argument, right?
Yeah.
Something had to have been created.
Well, because the way you stated, you said that you didn't believe that there necessarily was or there necessarily wasn't. And I don't
believe there's proof for or against.
For or against. Yeah.
Yes.
What I was trying to show you that there is, to some degree, some proof for. It may not be it may not be written in stone. There is a God, right?
Well, it's evidence. It's evidence.
It's evidence. My goal in this conversation was not to convert you to Lutheranism. That was not my goal. I mean, if all of a sudden you did, I mean, that'd be pretty cool. But my goal,
my goal wasn't to make you quit your religion. Yeah.
Yeah, my goal was to show you that once you start accepting some of this evidence, because obviously we can never truly know. Like from a fact perspective, you can never truly know unless we learn something.
Unless we like can scientifically explain consciousness.
Yeah, which
we don't have a clue about.
Yeah.
If we can scientifically explain that, then I think we're burying religion or the idea of a maker deeper and deeper into the ground. I already think that religion over time has been proven wrong time and again. I think it's at a good place right now, a good balance between science and theology, but I mean, throughout history, it's just been proven wrong and wrong and wrong.
My goal tonight was to show you that just because you may disagree with parts of religion doesn't mean that you shouldn't make an effort to see changes within it. That was my goal, that just because you disagree with some parts doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to not only believe in a God, but try and change whatever's closest to you.
To see some change. I would love to see some reform and change within Catholicism and Christianity as a whole, just like I would in Islam. I would like to see the most moral version of these.
I think every single religion, if all of a sudden they just stopped reforming, I think every single religion would eventually stop. Because change is necessary in the evolution of
Mhm.
mortality, of morality, not morality.
Yeah.
It's-
Well,
it's
unless you're a Muslim, is growing like crazy in terms of
Yeah.
proportion. They're going to be a majority of the, not just a plurality, but a majority in probably a century.
Yeah. All right. Well, this was a good discussion.
Yeah.
We didn't really get a lot of people actually were commenting, so I'm just gonna read through these. Yeah, we got those pronouns wrong.
We got what pronouns wrong?
God's pronouns.
Oh, we got God's pronouns wrong. That's hilarious.
Honestly, I feel like I agree that I've probably learned more in this discussion than I have through school about.
Well, but that's the thing, is because we are taught through school only the good parts about religion. The only way I know about this is because I have taken the time to watch videos by people like Sam Harris on atheism, and at the same time watch videos by people like David Wood. That's why I'm caught in the middle, because I'm like, okay, there's compelling arguments to both sides. There's things that don't make sense on their own on both sides. But if like you say, you grow up a Lutheran, how would you ever learn about these things unless you
have to seek
unless
out,
you learn into the other side?
You have to seek out other information, because if you're just fed all this information, it's you can never truly try and understand morality just from one perspective. That's just not possible. You have to like look from other perspectives. Are you frozen?
I'm sorry.
Still?
I'm sorry. No, I was reading.
Okay,
I was reading comments. Repeat that again.
No. Okay. Just overall, really good discussion. Honestly,
yeah, for sure.
Probably a discussion that we could have again. Maybe next time with some more people. But do you wanna close out the video with any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think a pretty good discussion. Yeah, like you said, I think we agree on most stuff. In terms of our morality, like the things I said were wrong in your religion, you had no need to defend them.
Yeah.
Like you just said, oh, like hopefully that'll change, which I agree. Hopefully that will change over time. So I think we agree really on everything. We both want a God in our lives. We just have different ways of pursuing that God, I think.
Yeah.
Is the only difference. So yeah, overall a great discussion, and this was a long one, almost 2 hours. So
yeah, no, that was like super long. Okay.
That was a long boy.
I'm sweating a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
My throat is like swelling.
Yeah.
So.
I've had a water here this entire time, and I took a sip in like the first 10 minutes and never did again.
Yeah, mine is empty. It's been empty for the past hour.
Yeah, but if you enjoyed the video, if you're watching this video, or if you're still in the live stream, we want to thank you for tuning in, and make sure you like the video and subscribe, and leave us any feedback if anything you want to see in the future. If you have an opinion that's different from ours, or even the same as ours, that you would like to share on this issue or any other issue, make sure you let us know down in the comments. Make sure you subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get alerted when we're going live and having these interesting discussions. But yeah, thank you, and we will see you next time.